To each of you, and welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. How the Grizzlies' success against the Oklahoma City Thunder could provide a highly successful blueprint when it comes to the playoffs, especially in the person of Jaren Jackson Jr. Plus, the Grizzlies have plenty of opportunities to continue emphasizing that blueprint with many games coming up in March, including tonight against the Indiana Pacers. That and much more on today's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Here we go.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, one and all, to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. You can find me at StatsSAC on Twitter. Credentialed media member with the Grizzlies. Have been covering the Grizzlies now for 4 years. Right for them over at Grizzly Bear Blues. And one of your co-hosts here at Locked On Grizzlies. Fellow co-host Michael Cole will be with us later this week. And of course, that's how the new era of Locked On Grizzlies will go. The majority of the time, you'll be able to get both the perspectives of myself and DeMichael Cole. But every now and then, you'll get myself, you'll get DeMichael flying solo on these episodes, offering many different perspectives and insights when it comes to the Grizzlies. You can obviously find the show at Locked On Grizz, free on all podcast platforms, wherever you choose to listen to it, and right here on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe button below. Lets us know you're enjoying the show and lets others be able to find the show as well. So obviously the Grizzlies are headed to Indiana tonight, their second game on a 4-game road trip. And the big news, obviously, that was revealed yesterday was that superstar Ja Morant will likely be out for tonight's game against the Indiana Pacers due to some back soreness. Now, it's not expected for this to be any type of big deal or significant injury. It's likely, as I've mentioned several times, over the past few months, it's just simply likely the Grizzlies are taking an opportunity in a game where they likely are still going to be favored. They still have a good chance of winning without Ja Morant. It's simply an opportunity for them to provide rest to the most important part of their potential title aspirations for this year. So opportunities that present themselves to get Ja and other significant players an opportunity to rest, that likely is what the Grizzlies are going to take advantage of. Sure, there probably is some actual back soreness, but just giving Ja another day of rest likely will be the preference as the Grizzlies amp up for their playoff run. But one of the things that stands out for the Grizzlies, I've discussed it in many different ways since the start of February, after the Grizzlies went through such impressive runs against pretty tough schedules in December and January. There were clear areas for the Grizzlies to improve, for them to be able to play the type of basketball that they were going to need to play in order for them to find success in the playoffs. And we saw a very good illustration of that on Sunday against the Oklahoma City Thunder with Dillon Brooks back in the fold, coming off of injury. DeMichael and I talked about it yesterday. The shot distribution could not have been more even. The Grizzlies' ball movement in the first quarter and overall when it came to the offense was absolutely outstanding. And again, you didn't need Ja Morant scoring 25 to 30 points for the Grizzlies to be highly effective on offense. He only had 17 points on Sunday, yet the Grizzlies had 30 assists. They had 125 points, 70-plus points in the paint. The Grizzlies were able to find offensive balance that led to highly successful results against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And while you may want to point out that what is relevant is the level of competition they were facing. That certainly is true. It certainly has been true over the past month as the Grizzlies' schedule has kind of lightened up in terms of what they faced in January. But at the end of the day, the Grizzlies are only responsible for what they can control, and we've consistently seen better outcomes when it comes to their ability to move the basketball around, find high percentage shots. One encouraging sign, and we talk about the Grizzlies shooting the three-pointer, we talk about them shooting free throws. One encouraging sign that we have seen over the past month or so is that the Grizzlies continue to get better and better when it comes to converting their catch-and-shoot three-point opportunities. In other words, the Grizzlies are becoming better at finding success when they create these high percentage looks from distance. They're becoming better at capitalizing off of them. They're becoming better at being able to hit those catch and shoot 3-point opportunities, those high percentage looks from three. But the overall thing that stands out is that when the Grizzlies are moving the basketball effectively and they're able to capitalize off the production that they have in the paint, what is becoming historical potential production. As we wind the season down, the Grizzlies could be one of the most productive paint teams in recent NBA history once this season is said and done. What also, though, is occurring is that the Grizzlies are using their ball movement and their production in the paint. They're doing better at capitalizing off of that to be able to convert shots from distance. And without a doubt, when the Grizzlies are effectively moving the ball while also making shots from distance, there is a very, very high correlation with them doing those things and them winning basketball games. Consider these numbers, for instance. The Grizzlies this season now, 31 different times, have had 25 or more assists and 10 or more threes in a game. They've done that 31 times. When the Grizzlies get 25 or more assists and 10 more threes in a game this year, they are 27-4. That includes the Grizzlies now having won 20 straight games in which they have 25 or more assists and 10 or more threes. We know the Grizzlies can get those 25 assists with rather ease, as they've been one of the best passing teams ever since Taylor Jenkins took over for the Grizzlies. We also know that if the Grizzlies can consistently hit these open shots that they create due to their production in the paint and effectively moving the basketball, them getting double-digit threes, especially with another shooting option in Dillon Brooks back, that is something that could become a bit easier for the Grizzlies to be consistent with. But if the Grizzlies can get those 25-plus assists, they can make double-digit threes, and they also, at the very least, can shoot relatively well from three. For instance, 35% or better, it becomes extremely likely they're going to win games. Again, 27-4 when they have 25 or more assists and 10 or more threes, including 20 straight wins in a row when the Grizzlies meet that threshold in a game. But let's go even further. When the Grizzlies have 25 or more assists, when they have 10 or more threes, and when they shoot 35% or better from three, they're 19-1 this season. And we're not asking the Grizzlies to do much. They're averaging over 25 assists per game. They're averaging over 11 threes per game. When they do both of those things, there's a very, very good chance the Grizzlies are going to win the basketball game. So if they can become more consistent doing that, it's going to lead to very, very favorable results. But a big key to that is Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren Jackson Jr. over his past 3 games is now 6 of 14 from 3. Since Jaren Jackson Jr. set out his only game this season back on December 11th, this is only the second time over 3 months that Jaren Jackson Jr. has had 3 straight games in which he's made multiple threes. But do not ignore the importance of Jaren Jackson Jr. making multiple threes. In 33 games this year in which Jaren Jackson Jr. makes multiple threes, the Grizzlies are 26-7. Including 11-1 in the 2022 calendar year. And again, it goes back to the fact that, again, ball movement is important, scoring in the paint is important, but the Grizzlies taking advantage of how many options they truly have that can make multiple threes in a game is also important. Listen, you're going to get 3 or 4 threes a night more than likely from Desmond Bane. But now with Dillon Brooks back in the fold, if you can rely on one of Dillon, Jaren, DeAnthony Melton, Ja, Zaire, Tyus Jones, or others, if you can rely on multiple players in that group making multiple threes in a game to support Desmond Bane, now making 10 threes does not seem to be that hard. You hope that Jaren can certainly continue to do it. As we see when he does it, that's another way in which the Grizzlies are able to find consistent success. There is a very good correlation between Jaren shooting well from 3 and the Grizzlies winning. And that's why, for me, along with obviously his difference-making defensive impact, if Jaren can certainly get into a rhythm where he can be a consistent threat from the outside, now with the Grizzlies having so many shooters that they can put on the court at the same time, if Jaren can get in a rhythm when it comes to shooting threes, that'll be a huge development to support Ja and Dillon and Desmond on offense. So the Grizzlies absolutely showed a way that they can be able to win games and win games consistently, even in the playoffs. It involves them doing what they do best, which was producing in the paint, but also effectively moving the ball, taking advantage of high percentage looks from threes, and especially when it comes to Jaren Jackson Jr., finding a rhythm to consistently be a threat from distance for the Grizzlies to have multiple options they can rely on when it comes to supporting Ja and their production in the paint. But the key for the Grizzlies is to take advantage of putting together these type of performances consistently. And it's going to be very important for the Grizzlies to do that as they take advantage over the next 10 days or so, winnable games before their schedule certainly becomes a bit tougher at the end of March and early April. We'll discuss that in just a moment. But before we do, I want to talk with you a bit about betonline.net. Obviously, March Madness is here. Bet on the Vols. Okay, bet on whoever you might like. The Tigers, the Razorbacks. The Mid-South has plenty of teams that are in the 2022 NCAA tournament. But whether it's college basketball, pro basketball, hockey, golf, boxing, UFC, whatever you choose to bet on, betonline.net is your best place to do it. The fastest and easiest way for you to bet and wager on sports. Go to it on your laptop. Go to it on your mobile device. Great interfaces, no matter what. But make sure you check out betonline.net today when it comes to all your betting and wagering needs on sports. Of course, we want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. But MLB free agency and trades are out there as Major League Baseball ramps up for his season. NFL free agency is officially underway now as well. After making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day, why not check out Locked On Titans, or why not check out Locked On Braves, who made a huge trade today? Freddie Freeman. Okay, we'll save that for another time. But when it comes to the Locked On Podcast Network, we got you covered regardless of your favorite team or sport. So after checking out Locked On Grizzlies, check out your favorite Locked On NFL podcast and your favorite Locked On MLB podcast as your second and third listen of the day. So as I discussed against the Thunder, the Grizzlies found a lot of success putting together a game plan that allowed for good offensive balance. And the way they found that offensive balance has proven to be it correlates very well with them being able to win. But the thing that also stands out about the Grizzlies as we enter mid-March is that all of a sudden, at the beginning of March, even 2 weeks ago, the Grizzlies had the easiest remaining schedule in the NBA. But the thing about it is now that the Grizzlies have gotten through several of those, easier games on their schedule, all of a sudden now, with 13 games remaining, with about a month remaining in the regular season, the Grizzlies now actually have the 10th hardest schedule remaining. And the reason why is because after the next 10 days, in which the Grizzlies are going to be playing games where they should be favored, the schedule becomes a lot tougher. So it puts a big emphasis on the Grizzlies, who are certainly still doing what they can to be in second place in the West. It certainly puts a lot of big emphasis on them being able to take advantage of any games that they should win. Right now, the Grizzlies and the Warriors both stand at 47-22, both being 7.5 games behind the Phoenix Suns. And of course, when it comes to the Utah Jazz and the Dallas Mavericks, both of those teams right now are 12 games behind the Phoenix Suns, but also 4.5 games behind the Grizzlies and the Warriors. And when it comes to the strength of schedule for the Grizzlies, the Warriors, the Jazz, and the Mavericks, here's how it plays out. For the rest of the season, the Grizzlies have 13 games left. They have the 10th hardest schedule in the NBA. The Warriors have the 17th hardest schedule. The Mavericks, the 24th hardest schedule. And Utah, the 4th hardest schedule. So at the end of the day, what stands out in these standings is that the Grizzlies are 7.5 games away from first in the West. And they also are 4.5 games ahead of the two teams in the 4th and 5th spot in the Western Conference. So for the Grizzlies, it's very likely they're either going to finish in the 2nd or 3rd spot in the West. You, of course, would love for them to be able to finish in that 2nd spot, and this especially becomes through as they do have a remaining game against the Warriors coming up in a stretch of games. It's going to be very important for this Grizzlies team. But tonight, the Grizzlies face off against the Pacers. They'll then head to Atlanta on Friday to face off against the Hawks. You'll be looking for them to face off against the Rockets in Houston next Sunday. And then they'll welcome the Nets to Memphis. And then they'll once again be playing the Pacers in Memphis on back-to-back nights. So the Grizzlies do have some built-in rest over the next 10 days. They'll have 5 games in basically 9 days. They have some built-in rest. They'll have plenty of opportunity to take advantage of 5 winnable games. But it's going to be very important for this Grizzlies team to win at least 4 out of these 5 games, in my opinion, and especially put together consistent performances where they're finding good offensive balance. Because we get past these next 5 games, and then again, as I mentioned a week or so ago with DeMichael Cole, the schedule certainly takes a turn in terms of overall being, fairly difficult when it comes to the Grizzlies wrapping up their season. Starting on Saturday, March 26th, the Grizzlies will welcome the Bucks to the FedEx Forum. They'll then welcome the Warriors. They'll be on the road against the Spurs, but then they'll welcome the Suns, be on the road against the Jazz, be on the road against the Nuggets, welcome the Pelicans, and welcome the Celtics. That's the last 8 games of the season for the Grizzlies. And outside of the Spurs, you've got 7 teams who are likely going to be pushing for the playoffs, and you've got 6 teams in there who are legitimately playing some of the best basketball in the NBA. The Grizzlies are going to have one of the toughest stretches to end the season of anybody in the NBA. So their ability to be able to really be in a position to where they could take advantage of trying to get that second overall position in the West, which could be the difference between them playing the best team in the play-in tournament or having to play a Denver Nuggets team potentially that's welcoming back Jamal Murray as well as Michael Porter Jr. That's a huge difference. That's a big difference. So the Grizzlies have got to be able to not only take advantage of this manageable schedule coming up over the next 10 days, plus the rest that's involved, but they also simply must continue to play good offensive basketball. And they're going to have plenty of opportunities to do exactly that. Listen, at the end of the day, in these 5 upcoming games, the Grizzlies should absolutely be able to rely on their size, rely on their paint production, offensive rebounds, transition, their defense, all those different things. That certainly should be the reasons why the Grizzlies put themselves in a position to win. But if they can complement that by continuing to show good offensive balance, continuing to effectively pass the basketball, continually finding the best shot that's available, that will allow for them to truly have the best outcome moving forward, which is taking advantage of not only winning games that they should, but playing at a style that if they can become consistent at playing, will put them in a much better position coming for the playoffs. And of course, the other byproduct of all this is figuring out the rotations, allowing for players to play in new lineups, allowing for new combination of players to really take advantage of playing with others for the first time, whether it be Dillon Brooks in the starting rotation or in the starting lineup with Ja, Desmond, Jaren, and Steven Adams, or different combinations coming off the bench, letting Zaire Williams settle into a new row off the bench as well. And again, with 10 potential players in a playoff rotation, do the Grizzlies go that deep, or do they figure out who the 8 or 9 most important players in that rotation will be when it comes to the playoffs? All those things should continue to be figured out as the Grizzlies play over the next 10 days before they have a very tough stretch of games to end their season. It certainly will be interesting to see. But of course, also we talk about the fact that when it comes to Ja Morant, him and others, there could be opportunities where the Grizzlies also get to rest their most significant players as a way to be able to make sure they're in the best position for the playoffs. It seems that's what the Grizzlies are doing tonight against the Indiana Pacers. But with that being said, a byproduct of Ja Morant not playing is that it could provide an opportunity for the Grizzlies to see how well they test against a threat that they could face in the playoffs. I'll explain more here in just a moment. But before I do want to talk with you a bit about rockauto.com. Listen, we all experience car trouble at some point in time. And as we're going through the winter, getting into the spring and summer months, we want our car running effectively as possible. And that may mean a parts upgrade that has to happen. Well, regardless of the make and model, regardless of the part that you need, rockauto.com is likely to have it. And the thing is this is a family business. They've been in business for over 20 years. They know that car parts a lot of times fall out of budget, so they try to make things as economically friendly as possible. When you visit rockauto.com, let them know that the Locked On Podcast Network sent you. rockauto.com, amazing selections, reliably low prices, all the car parts you ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. Obviously, on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, Michael Cole will be back with me, obviously breaking down the game against the Pacers and looking at how the Grizzlies are continuing to make the most of their rotations with Dillon Brooks back into the fold. That and much more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. So, of course, let's lay out the scene. We know that the Grizzlies are going to be without Ja Morant, but thankfully, they're going to have the rest of the roster at their disposal. However, the Indiana Pacers, just like the Grizzlies, faced a Thunder team that were without many significant members of their team on Sunday. The Pacers are going to be without players like, Miles Turner, TJ McConnell, Malcolm Brogdon, and others. Several players on the Pacers are potentially going to be out for tonight's game against the Memphis Grizzlies. But the thing that stands out is that the Pacers, who made one of the more significant moves at the trade deadline, trading Domantas Sabonis and others for Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield. That is a duo that, while the Grizzlies have faced him multiple times already this season, that is a duo that is performing very well for the Pacers right now. Both Halliburton and Hield averaging over 19 points since arriving in Indiana and showing very good chemistry as a starting perimeter duo. So the Grizzlies are going to face a duo that they faced in the past, but they're going to be able to do this now with Dillon Brooks, Desmond Bane, Zaire Williams, DeAnthony Melton, and Kyle Anderson. They're going to be able to do it by throwing different bodies at these two perimeter threats and seeing how effective they can be at stopping the overall scoring ability of Halliburton and Hield. And that's something that Taylor Jenkins has consistently recognized as important. The Grizzlies' ability to throw many effective bodies at different perimeter scorers, because being able to do that keeps those scores not necessarily off balance, but it's harder for them to adjust. It's harder for perimeter scorers to find the rhythm that they need if they're having to, decipher between many different defenders instead of just one. So instead of putting a Dillon Brooks on a Buddy Hield or a Tyrese Halliburton consistency, the Grizzlies throwing different coverages, different looks at these perimeter scores. The hope is that keeps them off balance and makes it harder for them to find their rhythm in order to find their success. So without Ja Morant being in the fold, that could lead to more minutes where we could see combinations of a Dillon and a Zaire Williams and a Kyle Anderson, or a Desmond Bane, a Zaire Williams and a DeAnthony Melton. You could look to see extended minutes for different duos and trios playing together for them to get a better feel of how they're going to play defense and the defensive chemistry improving, which is going to be so vital to the Grizzlies' success when it comes to the playoffs. So the opportunity that exists in this game tonight, even with the fact that without Ja Morant, the Grizzlies are still likely going to be heavy favorites due to just how different both teams have been on paper this season, it's going to allow for the Grizzlies to be able to get different looks at a very, very good perimeter duo. It'll allow for the Grizzlies to see extended minutes of how exactly they, with different duos and trios, can defend against a highly talented perimeter duo, which is something that the Grizzlies are going to have to be good at come the playoffs when they potentially face one of the stronger backcourts in the rest, like a Desmond or a Devin Booker or a Chris Paul, or a Mike Conley and a Donovan Mitchell, or a Jordan Poole and a Steph Curry. The Grizzlies' ability to be able to gain experience guarding against a Halliburton and Hield, that is something that they can build off of when it comes to the playoffs, and they're going to have to face a very talented backcourt at some point in time for them to be able to advance in the playoffs. So a unique opportunity for the Grizzlies to test out different defensive looks and find out what's effective against a talented backcourt in the Pacers that could certainly pay off once the Grizzlies potentially face other talented backcourts in the playoffs. But besides what opportunities may be there even without Ja Morant, make no mistake about it, the opportunity for the Grizzlies to get the victory tonight simply relies on them doing what they do best. Even without Ja Morant, the Grizzlies are going to have the catalyst in Tyus Jones that's going to be able to effectively run the offense and set the Grizzlies up to find success when it comes to their overall ability to score from deep, their overall ability to penetrate in the paint, their ability to get out on the run, turn defense into offense, and obviously be able to find success as they normally do. But this is another game in which, yes, Indiana does have some size that they could throw at a Steven Adams or a Jaren Jackson Jr. or a Brandon Clark. At the end of the day, the Grizzlies have the significant advantage in the front court. They simply need to take advantage of that. Jaren Jackson Jr. has a great opportunity to put together another game in a row of very good offensive production to get his confidence level going up. Both Brandon Clark and Steven Adams should have a field day, being able to get offensive rebounds, being able to protect the paint on defense, being able to find easy putback opportunities. This is a game in which the Grizzlies certainly should be able to continue their success of excellent first quarter production, establishing the tone for the game, establishing the flow of the game to be in their favor, and from there, getting a big lead and maintaining it even on the road and even with being without Ja Morant. So not a lot changes when it comes to the Grizzlies. Simply do what you've done best. Simply continue to do what you're elite at. It made all the difference in the world against the Thunder, along with some better offensive balance, but simply establish dominance on the boards, establish dominance in the paint early against the Pacers, get that possession edge, be able to limit Halliburton and Hield with the different bodies you can throw at them on defense. And even without Ja Morant, the Grizzlies should be able to find plenty of success against Indiana on the road tonight. It'll certainly be a lot of fun to see. Hopefully, it will result in another victory. Ja Morant will get the rest he needs, and then we'll be able to get another few days behind us before we once again go on the road to Atlanta and face the Hawks. Make sure you check it out. Also, a special edition of Locked On Pacers, including myself and Tony East, talking about how the Pacers possibly could put together some pieces of the Grizzlies rebuild for the own rebuild that they face. Check out Locked On Pacers with yours truly and Tony East. My name's Shawn Coleman. As always, it is a pleasure being with you. Hope wherever you are and wherever you're listening, you're having a great Tuesday. Check out the Grizzlies game tonight. We'll be back at it tomorrow with all the latest breakdown on the game between the Pacers and the Grizzlies. Until next time, hope you have a great day. Check me out at StatsSAC. Check DeMichael Cole out at DeMichael C on Twitter and the show at Locked On Grizzlies, and also right here on YouTube. Until next time, have a great day, and we'll talk to you again soon here on the Locked On Grizzlies.